this may sound obvious, but HVAC is basically internet proof in the sense that it doesn't matter how sophisticated Chat GPT or any of these, new technologies get, you're not going to, with that software, disrupt the fundamental need for heating and cooling homes and buildings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of HVAC Success Secrets Revealed with Thaddeus and Evan. I'm Evan. He's Thaddeus. There we go. I even got the pointing going the right way.
Oh, perfect.
No, I'm super excited for this conversation. I reached out to Alec, must have been 2 months ago now. I was recommended to him from a friend, and he said, you got to check out his newsletter. It's fantastic, and I think he'd be a great guest for the show. So I started following the newsletter for a few weeks. Lo and behold, it was fantastic. He's putting out great content with homepros.net or .news, sorry, not net. Honestly, a tremendous newsletter. He goes into all kinds of conversations. He interviews top industry leaders and what it is that they're doing to succeed. He's diving into the regulations. He's diving into PE and the impacts of it, the impacts of the current state of the economy. He's studying everything. He's doing journalism the way journalism used to be. And it's truly fantastic. I know you just signed up for the newsletter, so you're going to start seeing it too. I circulated some of the articles that he's putting out within our team so that they can stay up to date with what it is that's happening in the industry. So I'm stoked to pick his brain a little bit on the current state of heating and air and the home services and what this upcoming election is going to be, current state of the economy, all of it.
Yeah, and coming from somebody who does the research in and around it, right? Not just their own anecdotal opinion, but what the research actually dictates from it, and diving into the impartiality behind it, which is important. But of course, today's episode would not be possible without our sponsors. We have, in no particular order, Free to Grow, Chirp, Elite Call, and On Purpose Media. So let's go with this one. Have you ever thought about outbounding your databases to fill your dispatch boards with lucrative service and sales appointments and boosting your memberships too while entering Elite Call, a US-based call center that does just that? For over 20 years, their dedicated teams don't just make calls. They directly integrate appointments into your CRM and fill your dispatch boards. Don't let your competition get ahead. Let Elite Call connect with your customers first. Visit the folks over at elitecall.net today.
Perfect. And we have a new sponsor this week, Free to Grow. Did you know that the average booking rate for after-hours call centers is about 45%? I'm sure you've experienced as a home service business. What if your customer acquisition costs for after-hours calls could get cut in half? That's what Free to Grow does with their AI after-hours booking service. The scripts are completely customizable to your business and your market. And on average, they are booking 82.5% of the calls that are coming in after hours. Don't believe me? Test it out for yourself. You can call 757-550-3534 to test it out yourself. Plus, at the end of the call, you're going to get the exact same text message summary that your technicians will get after hours, including a summary of the call, the phone number, and you can get the complete recording. So you're going to get this when you call that number. So go ahead and give it a call. Side note, this is a basic call script as well. It can be completely customizable, again, to your market, to your needs, and including after hours booking call out fees. So test it for yourself and go ahead and give that call or give that number a call today.
I think I'm going to actually give that a call after the fact. So, which would be interesting. So transform your home service business with Chirp, the ultimate automation toolbox. Capture more leads, connect instantly, and skyrocket your sales. And look, coming up to shoulder season, and there's actually been some people like Dave, when he signed up in his first month in shoulder season, added $42,000 in revenue to his business just with Chirp. Cassie signed up and added $80,000 in revenue in 14 days in shoulder season. Want that too? Well, guess what? Click that link below, chirp.com/HSSR to get 25% off your first 3 months. Schedule your demo with them today.
And last but not least, we have On Purpose Media. For those of you that don't know, Thaddeus and I, we happen to run a marketing agency as well as do all this podcasting. So we do everything from websites, SEO, PPC. We want to make sure that people are showing up online, getting found by your potential customers when they're looking for your services. And then on top of that, build you a beautiful website that represents your business in an effective way, transforming visitors into actual leads and book calls on your dispatch board. So visit onpurposemedia.ca to book your call today. Welcome, Alec. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Sweet. Well, why don't we just skip the pleasantries, dive right in?
Yeah.
How did you get into this situation now where you started this newsletter? Where did this start? How did you get into the home service space?
Yeah, so basically, so in 2020, I started working at a company called Paesr, and Paesr is a software business that serves HVAC and plumbing contractors. Simple way to put it is we kind of built a full, Paesr built basically a full end-to-end business management software. So we handled everything from scheduling, scheduled dispatch, CRM, invoicing, credit card payments out in the field, things of that nature. And so I spent 3 years there, to be exact, and I was for the most part on our sales team. So I would sell and talk to these contractors all day long, and they would explain to me their problems and what was happening. And I started learning about the industry and what was kind of going on. And so I don't know, it was probably maybe I don't know, year and a half in, something like that. I started getting really curious about where first of all, there's all this stuff happening. There's interest from outside investment, professional investment, or private equity operators. There's a number of things on the legislative front and the regulatory front that are happening that impact these contractors. There's tons of new technology, just given the existence of Paesr where I was working, for example. And they were just there's all this stuff going on, and so I got curious about who supports it all from a media perspective. So who's covering it, who is writing about it, who's talking about it, and did some research. And basically what I found was there were only a small handful of companies that were doing that. And they've been around for a long time, kind of more legacy businesses, a lot of print publishers, and just thought that was, I don't know, that was interesting. And at the same time started really researching digital media and how news and information kind of works in other industries like politics and technology and finance. Found that there was kind of a model that had been working really well over the past 5 or so years, 7 years ish. That is basically this idea where, first of all, you don't print anything. You deliver it all digitally. People read news online on their phones, in their emails, and people appreciate it because if you're formatting it in a way that allows them to skim and dig deep, dive deeper if they want to, or just kind of sit down in the morning or in the evening, whenever you send stuff out, and kind of digest it pretty quickly, and just have kind of a good, holistic understanding of what's happening. And so I just thought that that model would make sense in not just HVAC, but plumbing, electrical, and eventually down the line, all these other home service industries. And eventually just said, what, I'm going to leave the company and try to do it myself. And that's what I did. I guess I can expand on it a little bit, but that's sort of the high level kind of what happened and kind of how I got to start doing what we're doing.
No, that's super cool. So you didn't have any kind of journalism background, any kind of interviewing background. It was purely based on seeing a need within the industry and wanting to attack it and create some value.
Yeah, I never had. I mean, I've never had formal journalism, training. Never went to school for it or anything. Same thing with interviewing. I will caveat though that I did get a pretty good education on interviewing and sort of talking with people over the 5 years prior, because I basically spent a lot of time on YouTube listening to just people in banking and technology interview each other. So I say that's
Nice.
that was my sort of journalistic education, was just watching YouTube videos and listening to our podcasts.
Well, sometimes that actually is the best way to be able to do that
Totally.
because you're it's learning too in a different sense. You're educating yourself and then you pay attention to their mannerisms, how they do things, and you
Totally.
adapt and you pivot, right?
Right.
And I mean, I also think about like somebody like the Hustle, right? And their email and their
Yep.
newsletter, what they've done. I mean, he had an 8-figure exit on his
Right.
newsletter, which is crazy.
Right.
Like it, and so like the power that can happen from a newsletter to be able to do that, and whether that's your plans or not, are relevant to the conversation here today. But you mentioned two things in terms of the impact of contractors from both a private equity as well as a regulatory standpoint.
Mhm.
I'm kind of curious to unpack those because especially
Mhm.
in PE, you look at what happened in 2020 and people coming in, COVID, like, oh shit, recession-proof business and COVID and people are spending money and, money was coming in hand over fist into the industry from private equity. And maybe it slowed down, maybe it hasn't, maybe it's done more harm than it's done with good, maybe it hasn't.
Yeah.
What sort of things have you seen from the private equity front that has either helped or hurt contractors?
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple ways to get into that. I think the first thing is maybe understanding like why private equity is so interested in not just HVAC, but plumbing, electrical, in the trades basically. And I think a simple way to understand that is the industries there are structural, like, the structure of the industries make for a good long-term investment. So what that means is, okay, let's just stick to HVAC. Well, first of all, this may sound obvious, but HVAC is basically internet proof in the sense that it doesn't matter how sophisticated Chat GPT or any of these, new technologies get, you're not going to, with that software, disrupt the fundamental need for heating and cooling homes and buildings.
Mhm.
So it's very kind of resistant in that sense. It's technology, it's internet proof. And it's obviously, resistant, not necessarily proof, like recession proof, but resistant in the sense that, a lot of that stuff, whether you're in a recession or not, people are going to pay to be comfortable. So those are two kind of things that just say, okay, like, it's not like a super volatile industry like, like cryptocurrency is, for example, where you could argue it's just a fad, or like, where it might not even exist 5 years from now. Like, that's just
Right.
not the case, heating and air. So that's one thing. I think the second is, at least on the residential front, is that homes, there's a couple things that make it a good investment. A couple other things make a good investment, like homes, for example, are continuing to get older. And I think the latest data point was, and this is, Angie used to put out a report called the Economy of Everything Home. I think the last time they did it was a year or two ago. I've actually asked them why they haven't done it, and I think that the guy quit who used to do all the reports, so they haven't replaced them. But um, their whole stat was, I think the average home in the United States was about 42 years old. And I think it's driven primarily by homes that are really, really old in the Northeast, where it's the average age is older, versus Southwest. I think they're a lot, they're newer. But as homes get older, simply speaking, their equipment breaks down because, if you've had a number of replacement cycles, as that home, from when it was built to now. So homes get older, their equipment needs replacing, needs repairing, needs maintenance. And so that drives the demand for, in this case, HVAC over time. The second, another part of that is the demographics of home buyers are changing. So millennials, as a percentage of home buyers, that percentage is growing. So more and more younger people are buying homes. Well, younger people do not do things themselves. Not a knock on any millennial, and anyone young, including myself, but like, they're much more willing to pay a
Yeah,
premium.
careful what you say. I technically am a
Yeah,
millennial, right?
totally. No, yeah, totally. Like, and including myself, like, I don't, we're willing to pay a premium for people to come in and kind of, to do this stuff. And so
Right.
that's one. And the third part of that, kind of a little subcategory, I guess, of that is, on the flip side, with older individuals, there's more of a trend toward I don't know who made this up, but the term is aging in place, where, because a lot of in-home technology has improved, like from a medical standpoint, senior citizens, people who are older, are choosing instead to go into retirement communities to age in their homes. And so they're going to
Mhm.
stay there while those homes also age. And that kind of drives, again, that's just a added demand for these, for these home services. So that was kind of a long explanation of, I think that's why, just fundamentally, private equity and all these investors are so interested in the space, because there are tailwinds, as they say in the investment world, behind them.
I mean, it makes sense. It's
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yep.
Well, and
Totally,
yeah,
yeah.
you mentioned the houses in the Northeast as one example, and
Mhm.
it's fascinating. I mean, we've had many clients that are up in the Northeast, and oftentimes they're encountering homes that have an oil based furnace, and then they've
Right,
got a gas based
right,
heater with their air conditioner, and then they've added in electrical and added in some mini splits, and the house is sectioned off into 4 different
right,
parts as to what it is that is heating and cooling
right.
that home. It's not on in the Northeast at all. Um, so yeah, it's and then you got a boiler system too mixed in there sometimes. Um, the
Mhm.
demographics of home buyers makes a lot of sense there. And it's funny, you're talking to two guys that are technically millennials, but I built my own basement
Totally.
suite. Thad's fixed his own furnace and air
I
a
ran
couple
out. I
times.
ran
Yeah,
out in it.
yeah.
Yeah, I've fixed my own
You,
furnace a couple times. Depending on what it is, the blower motor went the other day, and I was
sure,
like, you know what? No, I'm going to pay somebody to do the blower motor.
sure.
But
Yeah.
my igniter went. Yeah, that's one screw. I will do that myself. Thank you. Uh,
Sure. Yeah,
But the
no, and
stay at home, this is one that really hit home for me because I just, I drove across the country moving my girlfriend Lizzie here, and we stopped in Regina to go visit my parents. Well, the day before, they had a backup, and the toilet flooded, and it was all clean. It was just the line was plugged with roots, and so they had to
yeah,
get a guy in to cut it all out. But my parents are 85 and 80 years old. Like they don't want to leave their house, and their systems are getting old. The house is getting old. Everything's aging with it. They've been in
Right.
that house since 1970. And like, I saw it firsthand this weekend of the necessity behind home service companies and being able to take care of them, because they don't know.
No, I
They're
mean,
not willing to do it themselves.
my grandma's in her 90s and is still living at home on the farm. I mean, she's going to a home now, but same
Right.
thing. Right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, no, I mean, it makes sense. And I think like, so all those are like reasons why, okay, it makes sense to put capital behind these companies, and you could invest, there are obviously like financial reasons too. Some people will look at it just as a pure math thing, and they'll say, if I can buy a company at, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna round here, but if I can buy a company at 6x and I can put 7 of them together and I can sell it at 11 or 12, then you're just playing multiple arbitrage. Like, people do that, which is it's fine. But you can see it. I mean, people are clearly doing it. The latest, I looked at actually before this. So Capstone Partners is a group that puts out a lot of research on this space. And one of their charts is, I think, just all in HVAC deals. That does include, I think, some commercial deals, but basically all in by year, number of transactions that have happened. In 2018, or from 2018 to 2023, even though 2023 kind of saw a drop off in deal volume from 2022. So it's kind of like all the way up 2018, 2022, a little bit drop off 2023. Still, looking from 2023 to 2018, there were more than triple the deals done than there were in 2018. So it's just kind of evidence, like, like, it's not just people talking about it. It's not just one big deal happening here and there. Like, it is actually happening, and
Right.
it's happening a lot.
Now, are you seeing a slowdown at all in that activity? Because it ramped up massively through 2021, 2022, even into 23.
Yeah.
Have you seen a slowdown if it, like, the same way that we have in 24?
Yeah, I think so they put out that same company. I think they did sort of it was year to date as of the end of May, and I believe from looking at that was on pace to, I don't think exceed 2023. So it was still a little bit of a drop off in deal volume. So I have seen that just from a lot of some of the people that I'm talking to as well. But I think there are some other things that cause that. I mean, cost of capital, interest rates are a big one. Just there was so much activity that happened over the past couple of years, and then and they were doing that at essentially zero, very, very, very low borrowing costs. And now you have this, huge rise in interest rates. It makes the math equation a little differently. So I think it makes sense why that happened. That doesn't totally, I guess, surprise me. But while I do say that, though, like, I talked to a guy yesterday, runs a kind of a platform, investment platform out of, I think it was the Midwest. Yeah, because I asked him the same thing. I said, have you seen deal volume meaningfully drop off? Are people just not interested, or are you guys not willing to buy? And his thing was, that's just not true. Like, we're continuing to buy. If we can find good quality companies, yeah, I get it. Maybe from a high level, some of the data shows that there's less deals or whatever. But on our day to day, like, we're not really seeing anything meaningful that's going to, like, harm our business. Like, contractors are still interested in talking to us. We're still looking for good companies. We will still put offers in. We're still buying.
I mean, it makes sense, especially for the ones that are trying to do more of the M&A type of activity. Right now, it makes a ton of sense to be diving into that, especially when there is a contraction in the economy. That's when deals are meant to be had.
Right. Yeah, I think, and something interesting too, and I'm just ranting at this point, so I hope you guys don't mind. But, like,
No,
I think, I think
it's
another
DMO
thing,
for the show.
yeah, I think another part of the whole thing that's interesting to pay attention to, and a lot of this stuff is, keep in mind, like, a lot of this stuff, it's all private companies, so there's data out there, but a lot of it is just based on what people tell you. Some of the reports that do come out. But some of these companies, these consolidators, have gotten really, really big. The Apexes of the world, the Turn Points of the world, the Wrenches of the world, like, they are ginormous companies, like several multi-billion-dollar companies, just from a market cap standpoint, which is just nuts to think about. And I think, based on some conversations that I have, something to kind of keep an eye out for, or at least that I am paying attention to, and I'm curious as to how it's going to unfold over the next, I'd say, 12 to 24 months, is that, okay, these companies have gotten so big where, for them to keep growing, obviously they need to continue making acquisition. I mean, they need organic growth is a big part of that. So once they do buy a contractor, they want to improve the operations of the business and they want to grow it organically. But still, you still need to tack on more. You need to do more M&A. But because they're so big, I think what may start happening is some of these super big consolidators start buying the smaller consolidators. So, and there's some evidence of this
Mm,
happening. There was, I'm forgetting exactly when it happened, but I believe it was within the past, I don't know, 9 months or something like that. It could be within a year, I believe. But Apex bought, it was a company called Frontier Service Partners out of maybe Missouri. Could be wrong, but they bought, it was a smaller consolidator. And so they're using it, like that's kind of something that's interesting. I think that's going to happen. Um, there was a there was a report put out by an investment bank called Anchor Peabody. That was pretty interesting. And the guy basically made a point of, if you look at the timing of when some of these big consolidator groups had last capitalized, either formed or last capitalized. So the last time they either raised money or did a deal, or they just started. Um, a chunk of them were over the past, 4 to 7 years or something like that. And if you think about the average timeline for these funds, so basically, they have to form or they raise money, they have a certain timeline that they say, everyone who invests in our fund, we're going to, our timeline is say 5 years or 7 years or whatever. And then we're going to exit and we're going to give you your money back as a limited partner, as an investor. If you look at the timing of when a lot of these guys did it, it essentially comes out to where over the next 2 years or so, you could assume that a chunk of those companies are going to have to recapitalize in some way, meaning they either need to sell to a bigger consolidator, they either need to go public, or they need to do some sort of deal because their timelines are essentially right. Now, you could argue like, well, there are different ways to do that. Like you could, you know, without getting into like some of the weeds, like you can essentially, I don't want to say delay the timeline, but there are different ways you can kind of do that. But that'll be interesting too. I'm very curious as to, I'm constantly bugging people, asking them, who's going public, when's it going to happen, who's buying who, and so just another kind of interesting thing to pay attention to.
Well, especially if you're looking like the next 1 to 2 years, I mean, that's going to be some big noise. If you have
Right,
one of those larger groups go public, and I don't want to put a
right,
name to it and say, hey, you're going public. No, that's
yeah,
not the
yeah,
point here of what we're talking about, right? And so, in different ways to be able to do that. Now, I guess in looking at that, what are some of the harms for a contractor to be able to
yeah,
be on the lookout for? Because I mean, obviously, it can be the good things. We've had enough people talk on I think on
yeah.
our show about the good things that can happen with private equity. What could go involved with it? What are some of the pitfalls or the things to watch out for, the hindrances or hurtful parts for a contractor when it comes to private equity?
Yeah, I mean, some of the two big ones that come to my mind right away are, I mean, and there has been some evidence of this, but like, and that's just based on me talking with a handful of independent contractors in different regions. But like, one thing is, they could push a lot of their good talent away just by degrading the culture. Meaning, when they buy these companies, there's obviously return expectations, and one of the ways in which you do that is you grow your revenue, simply speaking, and you do that by selling. And so there's this whole talk about, well, once I get bought by company, private equity is going to come in, buy this company, and they're going to force all the techs to turn into salespeople. They don't want to do that, and they're going to drive all the talent away, and all the independent people are going to benefit. That's like somewhat, in my mind, a valuable or a valid argument. That's happened. That has happened in some cases. So I think there's potential like for culture to be degraded in some of these companies, depending on who the group is. I'm not saying they're all bad because I don't think they are, but I believe it has happened in some cases. I think the second part is, if these guys come in and something happens in the broader economy and it forces them to have to make a shift with their plan and cut costs even more, or just kind of, you know, take some sort of measures like financially where, maybe they end up having to lay off a lot of people because they either can't make their, whether it's how they capitalize the deal in the first place, they can't make their debt payments because the revenues are down, whatever. I think that's something that if some of these platforms may be in more trouble than maybe they present. And that could be something that I think could have an impact, is if they just have to go into cost cutting mode and lay a bunch of people off, which again, that would benefit independent contractors in theory, same way as degrading culture will. But those are the two big things that come to my mind.
Makes sense.
And then
Evan?
in terms of standing out in the marketplace around that, if there is other companies in your market that are getting bought up
Mhm.
by PE, how do you see them looking at ways to stand out and be able to compete against these companies that have massive amounts of dollars behind them?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I think that's kind of like one of the questions lingering, in the industry that's been lingering. I mean, it's kind of what do we do? I had a conversation with a contractor in two actually, one in Oklahoma and one in Arkansas, and they were very similar to me because they're both independent. They're both pretty scaled, pretty sizable businesses, but they're not backed by any sort of private equity or any platform. And well, the common thing that they do really well is they almost look at their HR team as a profit center of the company.
Hmm.
And basically what they mean by that is like, as much as they and as much as everyone puts a ton of time and money and effort into marketing and marketing data and which channels are working, which aren't, and that's kind of its own initiative. They kind of align their marketing team, or they have these two companies align their marketing team with their HR teams in the sense that we're going to look at our brand and we're going to look at positioning our brand is just as much as like we're going to look at positioning our brand for potential technicians just as much as we are for potential customers, and they invest behind that. And so when they look at an advertisement, for example, that goes out online, whether it's Facebook or Google, whatever it is, that is going to acquire customers, they think that that acts twofold and also attracts technicians. And they have, so they closely align their marketing teams and their HR teams to kind of look at advertising as sort of a two-pronged weapon, I guess, that does both of those things at the same time. And that's something that's really stood out to me when I talk to them as just kind of like a way in which to almost like counter private equity, but I guess for lack of a better term, really do that and really stand out, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And it makes a lot of sense in terms of, and we've had this conversation before where, recruiting it's an active sport. It's an active participant thing. You can't just put up a job posting and expect people to come
Right.
flooding in. So being able to align those two efforts of marketing and HR to not only attract more customers, but also attract the highest quality technicians, service providers, et
Right.
cetera, call center representatives, you need great recruiting. So it makes
Right.
a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
And another thing, I think that the company in Arkansas did pretty well. I mean, again, they're pretty scaled players, so it's different if if you might have a handful of guys or a handful of people working with you than if they have. I'm trying to think of the exact amount of employees they had, but they're a pretty decent sized company. But they've made such big investments into, for example, their facilities, their office, their shop. I mean, it almost looks like when I saw a video of it, or I was looking online, looking at some pictures and stuff, and I felt like I was looking at a satellite office of Google, like
Hmm.
like literally. And their whole thing was we've made such big investments in video, in particular, both on the marketing side, but also we leverage it for recruiting. That when people come in, first of all, they come in because they're attracted to it, to all highest quality tools, highest quality facilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That when people come in, well, one, not only do more people come in than maybe our technicians are coming into other companies. But when they come in, it's almost like a proof. I just want to see if this stuff is real because I've already seen so many of your video assets and all this stuff online, and now I just want to come see like what the heck this is all about in real life. And it's like a totally different. I don't know. To me, it seems like a totally different way of looking at it because they're not going out there having to scrape and claw for two or three people. They might have 15 guys come in. They have to pick, or they get the opportunity to pick a few of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, so. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
Well, you
Yeah,
even
it puts you in a
coming
position of power.
right, and like even look at we've had some smart people on that do that, right? Like it's just so much easier when they have everything all in line. So
Yeah.
shifting into the random question generator, probably one of our favorite parts of the show. The
Yeah.
random question generator is brought to you by the folks over at On Purpose Media. Hey, that's us.
Nice.
If you want a second opinion on your marketing, onpurposemedia.ca/second dash opinion, no obligation, no strings attached. We'll look through your online shit. We'll tell you if it's good or it's bad and what you need to do to
Nice.
fix it if it is bad. So, and then if you want, you can just hire us. But again, no obligation. All right. Do you, Alec, want question 1, 2, or 3?
Question 1.
Question 1. What's your favorite joke?
Well, I can't say my favorite joke. I want to get in trouble.
Oh, it's okay. We've said
I heard.
pretty horrendous things. I reference
heard
I
a
reference fluffers just for case that is in along those
Case
lines
for
of that.
context.
Yeah, for context, yes.
oh God, I kind of want to switch over to question 2 if that's possible.
No, too late.
Jesus.
Okay, so question 2, what's your favorite joke?
If you, I've actually, hold on. This is horrible that I don't have this written down, or that I don't have this off the top of my head, but I actually wrote this down once and thought it was hilarious. Hold on. I have it. I'm totally breaking the rules, but
Hey, it's okay. I
I
can buy you
apologize.
Still
I
your
can buy you
favorite.
some time and go with mine because I already know what it is. But
What is it?
what do you call an empty jar of cheese whiz?
Empty jar of cheese whiz?
Yeah, cheese
Cheese
was.
was.
So some people think that's a little cheesy. I think it's a little crafty myself.
That's not bad.
I'll never put a lid on it. Don't worry.
That's not bad.
I also like the what's worse than having ants in your pants? Uncles.
What is uncles?
All of those actually I heard on the one time I was riding public transit. I don't really ride it that often. Now that I have a knock against public transit, I just had a vehicle. But actually, my truck broke down. I was riding. Some old guy that looked like Santa Claus was trying to talk to like these 10 to 12-year-old kids. And he's like, you guys got any good jokes? And he's like, I got some. And he spouted all of those off. And I just sat there killing myself laughing. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm writing those down. I'm keeping those in my memory bank. Kids, it went right over their head, but especially the aunts and the uncles one.
I completely lost this joke, but I got to do it. One did came to mind, or it's somebody told me. I said, "What's what was it? What's Forrest Gump's password?"
But
What do you think? It's one Forrest one. Not bad.
it's actually
Not
good.
bad.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's
all right.
worse than running with scissors?
And running with scissors?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Scissoring with the runs.
That's good.
Ugh.
That's good.
I push the boundaries a little bit, but not too
That's
far.
Hey, it's
No,
not
that's all
racist.
right.
It's not derogatory. We're good.
Right.
Yeah.
We're good. So, you'd mentioned a few times the economy and
Yep.
talking about the R word that people are throwing around right now, and
Yep.
some people are like no economy. I mean, debate last night, political shit coming up, like
Yeah.
this potential for a colossal shitstorm.
Yep.
What are you seeing on your end?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think, first of all, the economy is like an extremely complex thing that I by no means, I'm not an economist, so I just want to preface it with that. I try to understand some of the big things that drive, what's happening, but by no means am I an economist. So I do want to say that. But yeah, I think the interesting part about it is that there are two almost like opposite viewpoints existing at the exact same time, or two. You can find data that supports the opposite things, and that's where it gets interesting to me. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you look at obviously the past couple of years, interest rates went from near zero. Now they're, I think the Fed funds rate was 5% or give or take. Consumer sentiment at one point over the past couple of years just completely dropped. So how people feel about their personal finances, how people feel about the economy. During COVID, people, I think through stimulus checks and a number of the government measures, at least in the US, saved up or accumulated about $2 trillion in savings, roughly, during that period. That's all gone. They've spent it all. I think as of March of this year, that specific pool of money is gone. Earnings growth. So I think just like wage growth has slowed. And so you have all these like kind of negative things that exist. There's a election in 2 months, give or take. Election years always make people feel weird. Again, prices of just eggs and groceries and all this stuff is higher, and people say, well, this is all bad stuff. But at the same time, if you look at a 5-year chart of consumer spending, it's just gone up. Like people have just kept spending. If you look at the average price of a U.S. home over the past 5 years, it's up over 50%. So people are richer who own homes, just across the board. So you pair that with, if you look at the past 6 months, you zoom in a little bit, consumer sentiment has actually started to tick up. You pair that with the fact that next week it's highly believed, or it's believed for the most part, that the Federal Reserve is going to cut interest rates starting at their meeting next month. And I think people are looking at that, and they're kind of they're projecting out, they're looking forward, and they're saying, okay, well, hold on, things may start to come down. Whether they do or not, different conversation, or how long, different conversation. But so you have all this like data that can say like things are maybe a little rough. Again, interest rates are high, things are expensive, people have depleted their savings, they're not spending money on big ticket purchases, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, they've just kept spending, and they're worth more in their homes. And inflation has actually come down. The rate of inflation has come down since 2022. I think it peaked at around 9%. Now it's like right around 3. And so then you have this like pool of like good evidence, but they both are true. And so that's like the weird part about it, and what makes it so complex. And I don't have the answer by any means, but like, I think that's what's happening, is that just that stuff is existing at the same time. That both those things are true. And I think it's going to be an interesting next 2 months. I think if the Federal Reserve does actually announce that they're going to start cutting interest rates, I think that's going to be a good thing for sentiment, just people's general viewpoint on the economy. Now, just because they say that on Wednesday, for example, doesn't mean that you're going to turn around on Thursday and things are going to be half the price, or your mortgage rates are going to go down the next day. It takes a little while. But I think that's generally a positive. I think the election makes it a little sticky. People are uncertain about what's going to happen there, and I think that's reasonable. And I don't know. I'll pause there, I guess, just to answer your initial question about.
Yeah, no, fair. And like you look at some of those the data points, and you look at that now. The other one is conversely that household debt is at an all-time high compared to earnings.
Yep.
And so you look at how, consumer sentiment is going in the positive direction, but household debt is also going in the same direction. It's going up, right? And so pair that with sentiment. And again, I'm not an economist. I actually haven't really looked into how this would actually relate into the economy. I just know that those two things are true and accurate. And so looking at that from a homeowner's perspective, or I guess an HVAC contractor's perspective, sentiment's going up, but so is household debt. What do I need to do to be able to position? What do I need to be careful for? What are consumers going to be telling me?
Yeah. No, I think that, I agree with that. I mean, I think I was talking to a contractor two contractors, one in Ohio, one in Texas, and one of them said that they're having sort of a gangbuster year, and that their revenue, they're going to grow 20, 30, something like that percent just this year. That's what they're budgeting. The other one goes, not every, but so many of my customers are getting declined for financing. And we're not, our sales are down. We were a little bit skeptical about how things are going to go over the rest of the year. And so I'm like, okay, that's interesting that those two things are existing again at the same time. But I don't know. I think it's going to be, again, an interesting next 2 months. I think if homeowners start to get a little bit more confident about big ticket purchases in general, I mean, obviously that's going to be a benefit. And the reason I say that is because some of the banks, so for example, Synchrony, public company, they announced quarterly earnings. Past 1 or 2 earnings calls ago, they had some real data, and they said, look, people are, they're spending, they're fine, but like they're kind of hunkering down on large, pretty large ticket purchases. And so companies like that have a pretty good sense of what's happening because they're involved in the transactions throughout the quarter. So I'm going to be curious to read, companies like those, their next, quarterly earnings calls, just to, see if some of that stuff actually starts to tick back up.
Well, yeah, and I think you are right. Like we've seen that too in terms of the marketing side of things, and installs and replacements are down and repairs are going up. And just because again, it's the positioning, and people have that uneasiness surrounding it, or maybe they're just strapped for cash, and so positioning the business, and obviously looking at what your financing providers are, and is there ones that can be able to help those individuals that have a lower credit score, et cetera, things that are going to aid in that. Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting time up until November, and then up until the end of January. It's going to be a very interesting time, to say the least, not just economic wise, but political wise too.
Right. Yeah. There's also I'll have to pull up the stat. But it's this idea of no matter who the president is, whatever happens, it's how people think it's going to impact their finances, or kind of like the financial part of their lives, and how long that takes. And again, I have to pull up the stat, but like also another thing to consider is, like, regardless of who gets elected, like the next day, again, if this election's on a Tuesday, like Wednesday, things are not going to be either really bad or really good compared to Tuesday. Like, it's going to take time for things to kind of iron out, and half the time, presidents obviously put forth, propose things, like it needs to go through Congress. Like, so there's all this thing that, like, it's not just because the president says I'm going to do this. He actually gets in office. One, it may not even happen. Two, if it does, it may take 9 months.
So or they're going to try it and nothing's ever going to happen in 4 years or 8 years, right? It's politics, right? And like, and I think people, I mean, I did a post on this, and people started referencing, like, political leaders won't determine your level of success. And then maybe not, okay, people started referencing, Germany and Stalin and Russia and Venezuela. And like, okay, very dictator communist countries. I don't think the US is going to all of a sudden drastically fall to a communist country. It just won't happen. There's still going to be the capitalist tendencies behind it. It's just a matter of, the Republican versus Democrat lines and where you sit. But those parties aren't going to magically just crater every single person out there, in my opinion.
Totally. Yeah, I think I generally agree. I think it's comparing. I understand that, but I don't think, to your point, you can compare like something like a Venezuela to the U.S. in that argument,
or Russia or Germany from 1930. Like it's almost 100 years ago. Completely different worlds.
Well, there's I mean, they'll say
merit to it.
That history doesn't repeat itself, but it is related, right? And are there indicators as to, we could head in that direction? Sure. You could find indicators for just about anything that would indicate that, right? Like you had referenced before, Alec, with the economy itself, that there's two equally strong viewpoints and both make sense. The numbers make sense. And, we are heading into an unprecedented time in history, I think, when it comes to the economy and what we're looking at and staring down the barrel of. And who knows what we can do, or which way it's going to end up going. But at the end of the day, in reference to your post that, and Tommy referenced this last week too, when we had the special episode that we had on with him, at the end of the day, it's up to you to determine what it is that you're going to do about it. Are you going to sit there and wallow in the fact that you can't control these things and you're going to complain about it? Or are you going to look at, what is it that I can take control of? What is it that I can focus on? And how is it that I can show up for my team today to instill belief into them that we're going to make it through this?
100%. Well, in the other part, I encourage it. I don't know if Alec, you probably know who Ray Dalio is. It's was Principles for a New World Order, and he talks about the 6 different stages of an economy since like capitalism in the 1600s started in the Netherlands, and like the rise and fall of economies in where they're at in the stages. And he's like, US is actually walking into stage 6, which is divisiveness, and that's really what we see. And so you're going to maybe decline in a world power, but you're not going to just go away to nothing. Look at the UK. They were one of the last ones. Well, they're still there. They still do great things. It's just they're not into like the heightened of where the US is. But divisiveness isn't going to win the day. Unity is, and that's, I think, the big message that needs to happen. So,
he's Ray Dalio is an interesting guy for sure.
Yeah,
smart guy.
Yeah. Very smart guy. So
runs the world's largest hedge fund. So
right.
He knows a thing or two.
Just a smidge, right? So, well, thank you, Alec, for coming on, and we're gonna wrap up here. We could probably keep going on these topics or other ones, and we didn't even get to the regulatory topic, but we wanted to be mindful and respectful of your time as well. So, thank you for taking the time to come on and chat with us. Of course, if you want to get to know a little bit more about Alec, you can get them homepros.news. is be able to get out to him. You can also reach him via email, Alec. So it's Alec with a C at readhomepros.com, and check them out on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/company/readhomepros. And we will, of course, put these in the show notes for y'all later. But before we go, Alec, we've got one final question here for you.
Let's do it. Yeah.
What is one question that you wish people would ask you more, but don't?
What is one question I wish people would ask me more, but don't? I would say, why do you, so I think about risk a lot, just in business, just like with what we're doing. And I think that not enough people ask me, or just ask in general, how people who seem to be like taking risks on things view them as non-risks, because they don't. And so that's something I wish people asked me, because I think I have a pretty good answer for that. But I don't know, people don't ask me that. They're like, hey, like, I'll tell my friends, like, hey, I want to go try this, media company, and I think I have an interesting angle, and I think it could work, and I understand the cost behind it, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, that seems pretty risky. It's like, that's not really. So people don't ask me that enough. I don't know, that was kind of an odd answer, but that's what came to my mind.
What's your answer to it?
Well, I think it's very dependent on the individual. And so I can only speak to my case now, but I think most people, I think when they're saying something is really risky, it's because you could be in a lot of financial loss if it goes wrong. So speaking specifically to financial risk, well, I think that if you can figure out, like, one, on the financial side, how to essentially hedge yourself financially, so that even if it does not work out, whatever the thing is you're going to do, you will still be even wherever you are from a personal financial standpoint. So whether that's by saving up X dollars before, and it's going to last you Y months before you go to try the thing, and you say, I'm only going to give it Z months, so that even if it doesn't work out, I know exactly how much burn I have, for example, like things like that. And I think the second thing is, I think when people try things, they actually, even if it fails, they actually end up as kind of in a net positive position, just because of, one, the people they have met throughout it, and then the things they kind of picked up, learnings and nuggets wise, that I would argue you're actually, even if it fails, you're probably actually 5 steps ahead of where you were if you didn't do the thing in the first place.
It also, one's own individual risk tolerance. I look at something like the Colby A test, for example, where they measure the quick start, and your quick start is your risk tolerance and your risk averseness. Generally, entrepreneurs are really high in quick start because they're open to change, they're open to trying things, they're open to risk. Where others, and again, completely fine if they're not a risk person,
Sure.
if they're risk avoidant, if they're then that's fine. They don't like change, you don't like risk thing, then great. And it's gonna again, you said, depending on the person, depending on the situation. So good answer. Love it. Cool.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you guys having me on. Seriously, it's fun.
It was good. So, and Evan was trying to say something, but he lost the sound again. So there you go. He's like, good times.
Good timing.
Yeah, it's okay. We didn't need him to finish up anyway. So, it's always, we were talking earlier, so just for everybody's full, Evan had some pretty big sound issues to start, and he couldn't get his microphone working, but it's like a several times daily occurrence for him. So thank you, Alec, for coming on. Thank you to our sponsors, Free to Grow, Chirp, Elite Call, On Purpose Media. I give those guys a check, and until next time, cheers. Oh, he's got it back. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. He fingered it out. See ya, everyone.
Yeah.
Well, that's a wrap on another episode of HVAC Success Secrets Revealed. Before you go, 2 quick things. First off, join our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/HVAC Revealed. The other thing, if you took one tiny bit of information out of the show, no matter how big, no matter how small, all we ask is for you to introduce this to one person in your contacts list. That's it. That's all. One person. So they too can unleash the ultimate HVAC business. Until next time, cheers.